North Gauteng High Court now, which has ruled in favour of Corruption Watch and the Right2Know Campaign to have the findings of the Arms Deal Commission set aside. Well, joining me on the line is Director for Open Secrets and Arms Deal Whistleblower, Hennie Van Vuuren. Hennie, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Lindi, good afternoon to you and the listeners.
Well, I can only imagine that to you today's ruling comes very welcomed. But tell us a bit about what transpired in the court today.
Yeah, Lindi, an enormously important day for our country and our democracy today. Judge Mlambo and a full bench of the court heard evidence of what was effectively a cover-up in the Seriti Commission of Inquiry, which was supposed to have looked at evidence of corruption in the multi-billion rand arms deal and failed to do so. It's a case that's taken all of 3 years to bring to finality, brought by civil society, who argued that effectively the Commission didn't consider evidence, didn't call key witnesses, and when it did call witnesses, didn't ask them the right questions. And I think what's been extraordinary is that the judgment affirms all of those positions. Effectively, the judges have had an incredibly difficult position about making a decision of their own peer, a senior peer in Judge Willie Seriti, and said effectively he failed the country, he failed the rule of law by not properly probing the evidence of corruption in the arms deal.
And I mean, Hennie, you were a whistleblower. Tell us a bit about what your role was.
Yeah, so I must be clear, I think this is a collective effort by many civil society organizations, but I and others have written about the arms deal, investigated it and published books about it, and I was called as a witness on that basis to come to the Seriti Commission. And based on a call by civil society, over 40 organizations came together and said that the commission must be disbanded. Myself, together with fellow witnesses Andrew Feinstein and Paul Holden, indicated to the commission that we would not testify. So we refused to participate. This was after spending 2 years of helping the commission with its work. We decided to withdraw in response to civil society's call. And at that time, Judge Willie Seriti and certainly the officials working in the commission, sent, or rather not the judge himself, but the officials sent an indication that they would consider prosecuting us for not participating. We made the right decision at the time. Civil society, I think, early on saw that the commission had become a cover-up, and their calls for the commission to alter its course, the letters we've got reams of letters that were written to the judge, were simply ignored, and I think that this again has affirmed that decision was a correct one, and affirmed the role that civil society has played in uncovering what is effectively a cover-up.
Yeah. And how was the court able to show, some of those things that you spoke about earlier that the Commission overlooked? How were they able to prove that indeed, the Commission overlooked crucial information in its investigation?
I think what Justice Mlambo has done, and very skillfully so, is to work through the papers and has been able to show very clearly that when key witnesses were called, we're thinking of people like Fana Hlongwane, who is linked to facilitating corruption for aspects of the arms deal, that they were never asked any probing questions whatsoever. So yeah, you have people that are implicated in the deal not being asked questions. Secondly, the Commission didn't even consider other evidence that had been produced in other courts. The Shabir Sheikh trial that was for President Jacob Zuma's financial advisor, who had been found guilty on corruption in the arms deal. The Commission decided simply they wouldn't look at this. And of course, by not doing so, they didn't need to consider any of the key evidence that also implicated the French arms company Thales or Thomson CSF and former President Jacob Zuma. One got the distinct feeling that there were certain people and corporations that were, if you like, being protected beyond reach. And I think the judgment sets out numerous examples of where this happened and are indications of how and why this commission failed fundamentally at its job and failed the South African people.
Yeah. And I mean, Hennie, for me, this raises really deep questions about the strength of inquiries, and maybe you can weigh into that. I mean, this particular inquiry set for 4 years, nearly 140 million rands just gone down the drain on an investigation that has now been set aside by the courts. Does this not raise questions about the inquiries, and especially, in the view that we've been having inquiries on a number of different issues, the State Capture Commission, the Life Esidimeni, and. What questions does this raise about the strength of inquiries in the country?
Well, firstly, crucially, what this judgment does is it strengthens integrity in the judiciary. We shouldn't see this as a narrative that all judges are now corrupt, etc., but rather what the finding by Judge Mlambo and others has done is to say there is a problem within our ranks. Even if it's a senior judge, we must speak out about it, and because this matter has been brought to our attention, we will make a ruling on that. In addition, what it does do is send a signal to all the other commissions of inquiry that are underway in the country right now, and many of them are very crucial dealing with contemporary state capture, the SARS, the PIC commissions, that the kind of conduct we saw in the Seriti Commission simply isn't acceptable. And their own peers will examine that, and this has set a precedent of the standard that we expect from commissions of inquiry. So, in a way, this is really important because it has reminded South Africans that we are right in having high expectations from commissions of inquiry in doing their job, and we must hold those commissions to account when they fail to do so.
And Hennie, I'm just interested, before we let you go, so what happens now when we look at the arms deal, when those names that you spoke about earlier on that popped up but were not adequately investigated of politicians and cabinet members during Thabo Mbeki's time, what happens now? Will they still be investigated? Does this investigation now have to start from scratch?
Well, firstly, I think it's important to recognize that this is a bad day for people like former President Thabo Mbeki, former President Jacob Zuma, and all the arms companies. Most of them are big European arms companies, the politicians who supported them in Europe because they thought this matter was simply going to go away. What is crucial is that the prosecutions against the individuals who are implicated in corruption and where there is substantial evidence must now continue, and against those corporations. The first of those prosecutions involving the NPA is taking place. That is Jacob Zuma and the French arms company Thales. That prosecution happening in Pietermaritzburg. I think the court will sit again to hear arguments in September. And so I think this must be the first in other prosecutions that are to follow. We do not need another commission of inquiry. What we need is for the criminal justice system now to serve the interests of the people of the Republic and to prosecute those who are responsible for these crimes.
All right, thank you so much for that. That is Director for Open Secrets and Arms Deal whistleblower Hennie Van Vuuren, just giving us reaction to that ruling by the North Gauteng High Court, which have today set aside findings of the Seriti Commission that's relating to the arms deal.